Let's kick it off then. So I'll say good morning or afternoon or evening to people in this session, or those of you who'll be watching this. My name is Melissa Davis, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the session, as well as to welcome Jenny, Laurie, Mabel and Megan, who are from the Department of Sociology in the University of Calgary, and really looking forward to your presentation on learning how to think, not what to think. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you for the welcome. And welcome everyone who's watching either currently or in the future. Thank you for attending our presentation. Our presentation is entitled, I Learned How to Think, Not What to Think. Student Perspectives on an Interdisciplinary Undergraduate Honors Program. And this is research we conducted at the University of Calgary, which is in Western Canada. The University of Calgary is situated on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 and the Métis Nation Region 3. So we are all grateful to be here as settlers on this land. I'm co-presenting with three of my colleagues, Laurie Jane Pasaraba, Mabel Teakau, and Megan Wilson. And we are from the Department of Sociology and the Workland School of Education at the University of Calgary. And we'll each be presenting part of this presentation on our evaluation of an undergraduate honors program. So I'd like to turn it over to Megan, who will get us started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So hello, my name is Megan, and like Dr. Godley said, we are from the University of Calgary, which is in Calgary, Alberta. So it's very close to the Rocky Mountains for some frame of reference. The University of Calgary is a research-intensive institution. It's one of the U15, and like Dr. Godley said, it's in Western Canada. At the University of Calgary, we take in approximately 25,000 undergraduates a year. So it's quite dispersive and wide, like quite a large undergraduate population. Now, in terms of the Arts and Science Honors Academy program, which we'll henceforth refer to as ASHA, that's a joint venture of the Faculty of Arts and the Faculty of Science. It was established in 2007. And how ASHA works is first year, enrolling in their first year students can apply to be in the ASHA program. So there's an admittance process, a whole bunch of people apply. And what comes out is a cohort of roughly 20 to 25 students, depending on the year. All these students are, again, majoring in either the Faculty of Arts or the Faculty of Science. Now, it's important to note that the students who enroll in ASHA enroll already planning to do an honors thesis in their selective department. So ASHA isn't the honors thesis, but it is designed to complement their honors thesis in their respective studies. In terms of this group, again, it's quite interdisciplinary, quite a broad group of students. And in terms of the classes that students take together, both themselves are also interdisciplinary. So ASHA students take a variety of classes with their cohort. In the first year, they take one year-long class together. Then coming into the second year, they take two classes, one in the fall semester and then one in the winter semester. There are no ASHA classes in their third year of study, and that is done intentionally so that students, should they choose to, have the opportunity to do a semester or a year abroad at another institution. And then in the fourth year, there is a capstone project. And so with that, I think we can move to our next slide. Oh, sorry, really quickly. I did want to mention as well that the professors are also interdisciplinary and come from arts and science, and they also apply to be a part of the ASHA program. So ASHA has several key learning outcomes as a program, such as developing critical thinking, intensive engagement with like nature and culture, the ability to understand and articulate a diversity of viewpoints, experience life and study abroad, and the ability to integrate depth and focus of analysis in a major field of study. And this is quite important, again, with an interdisciplinary cohort, because all of your peers around you have this diversity of perspectives. And I can speak from personal experience about this because I'm an alumni from the ASHA program. My cohort had many wonderful debates, bringing in a wide variety of perspectives and views. It is also important to note that because of the ASHA program and because of the way professors apply to teach it, it can be different from year to year. So there was one year where the previous, the course is called Representations, was taught by a drama professor, and he did it through opera music. And the following year it was taught by a sociologist who taught it through statistical analysis. Now, to situate our study a little bit more, we looked at 3 key points of literature. And those 3 key points were we did a literary analysis of honors programs, where we looked at various evaluations of those. And it's important to note the effects of selection on student outcomes with honors programs, because like ASHA, honors programs tend to be self-selected, and that can, of course, influence your pool of applicants and influence your data. We also looked at interdisciplinary programs at a variety of institutions regarding research and teaching. And again, we want to note that evaluation of these programs can be quite tricky. There's no one set way to evaluate an interdisciplinary program. And the last thing that we wanted to point out was that we looked at high impact practices, and this term comes from Zhao. And high impact practices are categorized as field internships, study abroad, leadership experience, learning communities, research experiences, and service learning. And these are all, note, key components into the ASHA program. So in terms of our study design, we had a quantitative survey with qualitative open-ended questions. For our recruitment, we emailed former and current students, and it's important to note that we did not discriminate based on whether or not students finished all of the aforementioned ASHA courses. So just because you enrolled in that first year-long course does not mean you will go all the way up to the capstone, but we invited anyone who had enrolled in that first year-long course to participate in the study, so we didn't discriminate based on whether or not finished. And finally, we'd like to note that we have ethics approval from the UCalgary Research Board. So in terms of our research questions, we had 2 key questions. We had a quantitative and a qualitative aspect to this. So for our quantitative, we asked, how does participation in ASHA both impact students, both academically and socially? And does the impact of ASHA vary from students in different faculties? In terms of the qualitative, from students' perspectives, what are the most important features of the ASHA program? Now, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Mabel. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so for the sample, we reached out to 57% of students who have ever enrolled in ASHA, as Megan rightly mentioned. And of this, we had a response rate of 89%. So 108 students, former and current students, responded. And we had 44% of our sample being current students and 56% being former students. For art and science, we had 53% as arts students and 47% as science students. So for respondents who studied abroad, we realized that 77% of our respondents studied abroad, whilst 23% did not study abroad. So we had a general question to ask students in the survey, which was their overall experience of ASHA, whether it was positive or negative. And on a scale of 1 to 5, students rate their overall experience quite high. We had a mean average of 4.7, which is quite high on a scale of 1 to 5. We conducted a bivariate regression just to see whether there are faculty differences in this experience, and we found that irrespective of one's faculty, whether you're an art student or science students were more likely to rate their overall experiences on the same scale. We also looked at students who studied abroad to see if there are any differences in their experience, overall experiences. And interestingly, we found that students who studied abroad were more positive about their experience with ASHA compared to those who did not study abroad. Okay, so we had also asked specific questions, which include whether individuals learned a lot in ASHA, they enjoyed the ASHA classes, it was easy to fit into their schedule. And based on these questions, we divided them into, we grouped them into academic experience and social experience using the factor analysis. So we had two variables here, the academic experiences, which is the factor score of all the questions that highlight on academic, and the social experience on the topics that highlight on social experiences. Former students were also asked specific questions that we later grouped to form the long-term impact of participating in ASHA. So these questions include whether they use the things they learned in ASHA in their day-to-day activities, whether they are still in touch with people they met in ASHA, whether they think ASHA helped them to get to where they are today. And based on this, we combine them into a factor score, and we term it as the long-term impact of participating in the ASHA program. Okay, so for our multivariate regression, we had the factor scores, that's the academic experience, social experience, and the long-term impact as our dependent variables. And for the independent variable, we have the art versus science, current versus formal, and whether individuals studied abroad or not. Our result shows that for academic experience, none of the independent variables was significant. So it doesn't matter. There was no science art divide, there was no formal student divide, and people who study abroad and those who did not had the same score. For social experience, we found that science students were more likely to rate their social experiences higher than art students. And for formal students, the long-term impact, we realized that as students were more likely to rate the long-term impact, they were more likely to note that ASHA affected their direction in their careers or their academic life. So with this, I would like to hand over to Laurie, who will take us through the qualitative results.
Okay, thank you, Mabel. So now for the qualitative portion of our study, I would like to highlight that this section was done in order to gain a comprehensive understanding of the students' experiences in ASHA, which we would not be able to do if we relied on the quantitative portion alone. So what we did was we added 7 open-ended questions in the survey, asking students to free write about their ASHA experience. And these questions range from their most memorable experience in ASHA to their thoughts about the most important thing that they have learned from the program, and even what they thought ASHA needs to improve on. All of the responses were saved as text data and uploaded in NVivo. The first round of coding was done individually by the 3 members of the research team. Codes were then compared for reliability, and after that, we conducted thematic analysis. And consistent with the quantitative results that Mabel has discussed earlier, major themes that came out about the students' experiences in ASHA were their positive academic experience, specifically in their interdisciplinary and research work. Positive social experience also came out and were highlighted by their opportunity to study abroad and gaining a sense of community in ASHA. Details of these experiences, as well as some quotes from the students, will be shown in the next slides. So this quote, it's from a former student. It illustrates how interdisciplinary learning, which is one of the main goals of ASHA, was valued by the students. They have mentioned that the structure and content of the courses, as well as interaction with their peers from other faculties, encourage thinking through an interdisciplinary lens. Many students even shared that learning philosophy and other languages, for example, helped them approach their work in their primary subjects with an interdisciplinary perspective. Students' positive academic experience was based on their appreciation of how their academic skills had improved because of their ASHA classes. Specific academic skills that were mentioned included reading and writing, research, statistical skills, presentation skills, and public speaking. Many students also shared that their softer communication skills had improved. Other students also shared that they've become better in various aspects needed for teamwork, such as active listening, collaboration, and navigating interpersonal relationships. Students also had a positive social experience because of the sense of community that ASHA provides. Respondents shared how they both like having peer friendships and supportive relationships with professors and being with the same group over time. The students also clearly articulated which high-impact practices had the most influence on them in ASHA, and these are studying abroad and research. This came up multiple times in the qualitative data, which supported the quantitative findings that those who did study abroad generally had a more positive experience with ASHA than those who did not. And I'll pass it back to Jenny.
Thank you, Lori. Now, just a brief discussion and limitations section before we open it up for questions. So what we found was that really there were two aspects to the students' experience with ASHA, and we found this both in the quantitative and the qualitative data. There was really an academic aspect and a social aspect. And both of these appeared to be very positive for most students. In particular, as Mabel noted, we saw that the social experience appeared to be slightly more positive for the science students. So we have a couple of ideas about why this might be. One is that at the University of Calgary, the initial courses in science tend to be very large. It's a very large university. And those courses in that first year tend to be very large in the science faculty. So I think that the students who enter ASHA are given this opportunity to be in a cohort with fewer students and get to know students in a way that their colleagues who are also in science aren't. So perhaps this is what we're seeing. We also found, both in the quantitative and the qualitative, that some of the most important features of the ASHA program are things that are considered high impact practices, such as the research component and the study abroad. But we also found very clearly that the cohort and community aspect was very important for students, and that the types of skills that they learned included things like critical thinking and being able to think in an interdisciplinary way, which aren't necessarily given to them in other parts of their undergraduate career. And it's important to remember that these are all students who are doing honors in their own departments, so they're very specialized in their own disciplines. Just to talk quickly, one other thing I wanted to mention in the discussion is another finding that Mabel mentioned, which is that the art students, when we look at the former students, the art students seem to say that ASHA had more of an impact on them in the long term. And we suspect that this might be because students coming into arts degrees have less of a defined idea about what they might want to do in terms of a career, whereas many of the science students have decided quite early on what they want to do. So ASHA perhaps didn't have quite as much of an impact in terms of their career trajectory. Just briefly to talk about some of the limitations. Obviously, it's a case study of one program at one institution, but we hope that highlighting some of the aspects of the program that were particularly important for students will enable people who are designing these types of programs in other institutions to learn from our experience at the University of Calgary. Another limitation is that we weren't able to ask or look at many differences in terms of demographic attributes of the students. And this is mainly because it's such a small group that they would have been identifiable had we asked questions like gender, race and ethnicity, etc., or had we looked more deeply at the actual disciplines that the students were in. So in any one year, there may only be one student from the Department of English, for example. So we weren't able to look at that in great detail. It's also important to note that the program is largely female. Each year, about 4 to 5, there are about 4 to 5 male participants. We really weren't able to look at gender just because we were worried that that this would violate the privacy of, particularly of the male participants. In terms of what we're going to do next, we're quite excited that we have an opportunity to interview the professors who have been teaching in the ASHA program. And it's our hypothesis that the professors also benefit from this program and that their benefits might also be both in terms of professional connections and in terms of more personal connections. So we're hoping to find out about that by interviewing many of the professors who have taught for the past 11 years of the program. I would also like to note, before I conclude with these two quotes, that this project was funded by a grant from the Taylor Institute at the University of Calgary, which provides grants for ASHA research. So in conclusion, we thought we would end with two quotes. The first quote being more about the social aspect and the second quote being more about the academic aspect of ASHA. The first quote, ASHA taught me how important it is to find people who you are not afraid to express yourself to and who will support you academically, professionally, and personally. ASHA gave me another family. And then the second quote, more on the academic side, this is the quote from which we took the title of our presentation. I learned how to think, not what to think. ASHA generally prepared me for academic processes like research and paper writing and ethics before other classes. I felt better prepared than non-ASHA peers. So thank you very much for attending our presentation, and we're happy to answer or to try to answer any questions you might have or comments.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Laurie and Mabel and Megan as well. That was a fabulous presentation. Thank you so much for being on time, so clear. I can't say how pleased I am with that. And really fabulous research as well with the quantitative and the qualitative element. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about actually seeing from the staff perspective the benefits for them. I have no doubt that there would be the benefits that you're kind of talking about. But mostly, what a fabulous program that the students have the opportunity to take part in. I don't know, Megan, you were saying that you're an alumni. I wondered about the abroad study. Kind of, what's the length of that? Where do students go? What do they do in that time? Is anyone able to?
Maybe I can start and then maybe you can talk a little bit about your own experience. But this is interesting, Melissa, because this is a feature of the program that they have actually removed recently. And the reason they removed it was that they thought that it was disadvantaging certain students who maybe didn't have the economic means to go abroad. So one thing we actually looked at, we didn't report on it here, but we did, we sort of did a kind of proxy measure, if you will, of social class by asking students about their parents' level of education. And we found that there was actually no difference in terms of who did study abroad. So we suspect that actually there's enough scholarships and things around that people are able to the initial 5 or 6 years of the program, it was supposed to be a study abroad for at least one semester, if not a full year. And it was supposed to be tied into learning another language. So it was quite specific in the initial years of the program. The latter 5 years, the data that we have, it became much broader. And so students were able to do much shorter time abroad if they wanted, and it didn't have to be tied to a language. And many students actually participated in research trips abroad. So there were students who were doing exchanges with universities where they were actually doing research. Some of the science students, for example, went to Sweden and did research. So I think broadening it a bit really enabled it to be more appealing to a wider range of students. What they've done now is they've tried to make it more of what they're calling it, I think it's now called a cultural experience. And so they're encouraging students to do something that's outside their norm. And it doesn't have to involve travel. So it could be, for example, that maybe you work at a nonprofit in Calgary for 6 months. And then you reflect on how that's affected your learning or your understanding of who you are or your understanding of your discipline. So we have yet to see whether that has the same benefits, I think. But Megan, did you want to talk a little bit about your experience and your cohort's experience?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. So I actually had a very weird abroad experience, and part of that was because I had to work in the summer, and part of that was because I am an English major by training, and I did nothing against the UK, it's a lovely country, but unfortunately I wanted the experience of a non-English country. And so I couldn't do a semester abroad because it is very hard to do an English honors degree and meet all your course requirements in a non-English institution. So I ended up going to do 2 spring group studies to get my requirements. So in the spring of 2018, I went to Greece on a 3-week intensive looking at archaic sport and culture, and that was lovely. I got to go to the Peloponnese for 3 weeks. And then in the spring of 2019, I was in Perugia, Italy at the Università Stranieri learning Italian, and my Italian's not very good, but I learned something there, which was lovely. So that's how I made my abroad fit. I had peers in my cohort who did all sorts of fabulous things. So one of my very close friends, who's a natural science major, had quite an intensive degree, and she couldn't go do a semester in the fall or winter either, but she did a spring semester in Spain and then a summer semester at a university in the UK. And I'm trying to remember where Claire went, but I cannot seem to quite remember. But then I also had one of my other really close friends went to Edinburgh for a year and spoke very highly of it. I had my one other friend who she bounced around South and East Asia for 6 months. And this was based out of Singapore, but would bounce around to various countries through that program that she was at in Singapore. Fabulous opportunities. Everyone did something very cool. And you would look at your cohort and be like, I wish I was on that trip, but also I wouldn't give up mine.
I don't know the statistics, Melissa, but it's actually, I think it's much less common in Canada than it certainly. I went to school in the States, and certainly in England, it's very common to go abroad as part of your education. I think it's much less common here. So in a way that makes it more interesting for the students, but also more difficult. In particular for the students in sciences, because they have so many requirements. And so to fit the study abroad, and it was very rare that a science student would be able to earn the credits they needed for their science degree during their study abroad time. So that was tricky.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for that. And just as you're speaking here, well, certainly at my university, and it's COVID related rather than anything else, we've done some virtual study tours, and I think there's some great potential there, where you've had cohorts of students, and they've got together online. For a couple of hours or how many hours a day over a couple of weeks, for example, and certainly nowhere near actually going and immersing yourselves in the culture. But I think our students are seeing some value of that.
Yes, definitely. I think there's some of that happening here too. I know there's at our international office, they're setting up some of those programs where they work with students in completely different countries, right? So they're actually meeting with other students, which is nice.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. I'm noticing the time, and I'd probably better close this session so that I can move on to the next session. But I appreciate all of your contributions to the session. It was lovely meeting you all.
Yes,
good night
too.
for those of you who it's evening time, and I hope that you are able to get to some more of the conference, or at least to watch recordings later on.
Great. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you all so
everyone.
much. All the best. Bye.
Bye.